How's it going, folks? Welcome back to another adventure in your garage. And today we're in my garage. Okay, so we got something a little bit different going on today. I don't typically work on classics and I don't typically do custom work, but work is work and I'm always looking to improve in different areas of weakness. To be a good mechanic, you gotta be two things: cleanly and diverse. You gotta know electrical, you gotta know mechanical, you gotta know old school, you gotta know new school. Today we're gonna be putting in power steering on the International Harvester. This is a Scout 2. And so we've already done a few things on this. So I'll kind of bring you guys along. Here's our original steering gearbox. And here's the one I'm using to replace it. There's two different options on these Scouts for the steering gear. So mine needed a total vertical setup, and that's what this guy is. There's another part of this project that's a little frustrating, but I'm sure some of you guys will be running into this too. Is at some point, this originally came with a 4-cylinder. At some point, they switched out the drivetrain with a Chevy drivetrain. And so it's a franken-truck, yes. And so for my power steering pump, but I'm gonna be mounting a Chevy power steering pump onto the block. And then I have to make that friends with this guy. So I need to figure out on both the pump and the steering gear, I need to figure out my high pressure side and my return side for hooking up my hoses correctly. But the first thing is just gonna be getting things mounted. So I'll take you down here. So the first step I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this Pitman arm off the original steering gear. This is a 1 5/16, I believe, nut on here, but it hasn't been taken off in like 100 years. So it's really hard. But I don't have the vehicle jacked up or anything because one, it's a truck, so that's kind of nice. You can just slide under it. But two, most of my work's gonna be up top. So there's that main bolt, and then there's down here on this side, there's these 3 bolts. I don't know how much things I'm gonna have to change around. Like I've talked about before, when I do research for stuff like this, I only look at research from the manufacturer. I don't YouTube any of my professional projects. I look at it as I'm supposed to be a professional technician, and if I can't find the information through the manufacturer, then I need to sort it out myself. Doesn't mean I don't love watching cars in YouTube, but I do it for entertainment purposes. So I didn't go and see if anybody's done this project before. I'm sure they have, but these Scouts are so rare. Yeah, anyway, these Scouts are so rare, I don't think there's probably a lot of published material out there on these. But outside of rebuilding the brake system, I also put in a Skookum battery with a disconnect because this thing's gonna sit a lot. So for those of you out there with classics, dude, I'm so sweaty, I'm sorry. It's really hot. Yeah, I don't have AC in my garage. For those of you that have classics that sit a lot, super easy mod. Put that on there and then it'll help with that battery drain for over time. So let me try to get this Pitman arm nut broke loose. I'll get those other 3 bolts, and then I'll check back in. All right, it's been a minute since I've had to pull Pitman arm, but I want to give you guys some tips. One is you're definitely going to need a Pitman arm puller. You should be able to get one at your local automotive store. You might be able to even rent one for free. But some of you might be really struggling to get that nut off. That's because the torque spec for it's like crazy high. I think it's like over 200 pounds. So because a lot of people aren't able to achieve that torque, a little trick is adding red Loctite to make sure it's secure in there. Mine's just been sitting, and as you can see, rust has gotten into the system. So a good way to break rust and Loctite free is with a method called heat shocking. So I use, this isn't MAP gas, but it's pretty much its replacement. So I'll take my torch and I'll try to evenly, heat up around that nut there. Spend a good minute or two doing that, and then I immediately spray it with some cold water, let it cool down, and then I'll cycle that 2 or 3 times, and then I'll try to break it loose. And then another tip for the DIYers, I didn't have enough leverage with my ratchet. So to extend my breaker bar, I used the handles of my floor jack, slide it over that, and that gives me an extra few feet of leverage. And that's how I was able to break it free. Took about 10 minutes, not bad. Okay, so where are we at? So obviously got the Pitman arm nut off, these 3 mounting bolts, and then this bolt here, this retention bolt. And you'll want to pull that retention bolt all the way out, because you can see the way that it's made, that retention bolt slides into that little groove there. And so what we're looking at is, this is the extension to make up for it not being power steering gearbox. It's just a normal standard gearbox. The problem that I have to try to solve now is I need to pull the steering gearbox assembly from the rest of the steering gear. This is seized up in here. So I'm gonna do some problem solving and try to figure out how to pop that off. And then we should be able to toss our new one in. All right, folks, so I wanted to show the process. I think I found a system that's gonna work, but I wanted to show you the heat shock process. And then some gentle, I'm not going too ham with this hammer because there's bushings and stuff in here I don't want to wreck. But I don't know if you can tell, give you some better light here. We finally have our threads coming through. At this point, let's try some penetrating oil. See if we can work it up in there. At least give us a little bit of lubrication. I don't know, penetrating oil is more for soaking. Is that working? So, poor neighbors. She's free. Cool, so that seemed to work. Give that a try if you're struggling. All right, folks, so I finally did some sorting and figuring, and I want to show you where we're at. I got my Chevy power steering pump mounted up, but I had the wrong adjustable bracket style. This water pump doesn't belong on this year engine. This is, I believe, from 71. I think this is a later model or earlier model, but it has this extra bracket. See, it's got this extra part down here, and it was in the way of my original one. So I found another bracket that's gonna work. I sorted out my hoses. My hoses are all gonna be happy. The Scout hoses match with the Chevy hoses, which I was really hoping for. You know, obviously there was a chance that it wasn't gonna work out like that, but I feel like American cars during this era were just all so similar that a lot of things you could just swap out. But yeah, so I got my V-belt. I got that measured out and ordered the size that I'll need for that. And then I was having a real hard time mounting this up. And so a little tip, if you plan on working on a bunch of old stuff, I keep around a gallon of vinegar white vinegar. I'll soak the parts in it. So you can see down here, I'm doing what I can on that little shaft. It's not doing great, but I'll take what I can get and I'll let it sit overnight. And that'll help get the rust off. So if you're trying to be a baller on a budget and you want to reuse parts but they're all rusty, soak them in vinegar. If they're super rusty, like pitted rusty, you're gonna want to do full 24 hours, swap out the vinegar, do another 24 hours, and that'll get that part cleaned up. And then take a brush to it, get everything off, and then rinse it with water, dry it, and then it's basically ready for paint. Power steering work. When they come back from the rebuild factory, they're already set center. So see how the large markings are squared up with this thing? So make sure that your steering wheel is on center. All right guys, so I wanted to update you on where we're at. I had to remove this portion of the steering assembly because I wasn't able to easily get it on there. And I don't want to be hammering that thing and forcing things. You never want to force anything when you're working on a car. But I wanted to show you, I know there's a lot of tricks for getting rust off, but off these splines, look at how nice that spline looks now. Okay, I soaked it in vinegar for 2 days, and I soaked the female end, and now, check it out. It just slides right on and right off, even though this thing is like 50 years old or whatever. So when you're working on old trucks and stuff like this, you know, never be in a rush. You know, take your time, clean that rust off. It'll make your life a lot easier. So now I can put this section on here and then put it all in as an assembly, and then that'll just slide right in. So if you're struggling, use vinegar, clean off those splines. All right, folks, so this is where we at. We got our power steering gearbox in. This is all in, fresh Loctite on there. That's tightened down nicely. I got my lines ran. Now I know my lines, they look a little funky, but I was really worried about anything rubbing or getting too close to the exhaust manifold. So I routed it. You can see it's not touching down there and it's not touching on here. Vibration, you know, these lines can be really susceptible to just a little bit of rubbing is all it takes to kill that line. And then down here, if we have a look-see. So those bolts, I went to Ace Hardware. I got 5" by 7/16 bolts. They're a little bit short. I think this casting's a little bit thicker than the manual gearbox. And then I still don't know if my Pitman arm is gonna fit on there, but right now I'm soaking it in engine degreaser. I'm gonna pull it out of here, let it soak in vinegar overnight to get the rust out of here, and then see if they'll mate up. If not, I'll have to get a different size Pitman arm to match this, but I'm sure it'll fit. I'm sure it'll all work. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. You'll need a little bit longer bolts if you're converting from manual steering on your Scout to power steering. But we're really trying. The question here is, can we make a Chevy 350 power steering pump work with an International Scout? I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably in that same position. All right, folks, well, there's part one. That's where I'm leaving off. I haven't finished it yet. I hope it all works out. And then, so I'll show you the rest of the process, and then I'll show you power steering pump bleeding. I remember when I was learning, there was no real honest answer. There was like professional videos that were like, oh, well, you need to put a vacuum on it to pull out all the air, you'll ruin the pump. Power steering system bleeding is super easy. So I'll take you guys through that process in the next video. I don't know, I'm sure Chris Fixer has like a video on it or something. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something along the way, and stick around. Please like and subscribe. Stick around for part 2. Hope you had a fun adventure in the garage.